Edwards, Gordon is there. Backpedals, jabs, shot. Slammed in. Reed parachutes. It is lead is 7. It's stolen by Conley. He pickpockets Murray. He gets it off to Reed. Corner, Edwards, aim, shoots, score! Timeout!
I lost, I'm out.
Now, back to Steiny and Guru on 95.7 The Game.
Kevin Harlan, TNT?
Yes.
I'll tell you what, there were some Timberwolves fans in that building last night.
Well, you couldn't hear the Nuggets fans in the second half. No. I don't think they scored for half of it.
Let me ask Warrior fans a question at 888-957-9570. We got essentially we got the Final Four in the NBA right now. We got the Pacers and Celtics, and we got the T-Wolves and the Mavericks.
Number 4.
How much better or how much worse do you feel since the season's ended about your Golden State Warriors? In other words, if you've been watching the playoffs, do you think you're closer than you maybe thought at the end of the year? Or do you think that what you've seen in the postseason scares you? Does it scare you what you're seeing in the postseason as it relates to the Golden State Warriors? Or do you see a way, Evan, where the Warriors can climb back in this thing in one off season?
I think if you measure man for man against the top 4 teams, it's pretty daunting. You know, you're looking at, okay, how's this kind of going to match up? Well, the Warriors going to do this? How the hell are they going to, guard Anthony Edwards and, Naz Reid and Cat and all these guys? I mean, yesterday, Steiny, what I took away from that series was, dude, Minnesota's just a better team. I thought Jokic was the best player in the series. Didn't matter. He had 35, 17, and 9 in a Game 7, and they lost because nobody else could do anything. And it felt a little bit like I was watching Curry at times throughout the season, or the past couple seasons, where we're just begging for some help, begging for some guy to hit a shot. Somebody put the ball in the hole. Now, Minnesota's defense was suffocating, but I think that specific series, more than any of the rest that we've seen so far in the postseason, in a way, it does make me feel better because I feel like it proved everybody wrong. Like, everybody was wrong at some point in that series about whatever they felt.
Right.
After 2 games, Denver was dead. After Game 5, Minnesota was dead. After Game 6, they beat them by 45 freaking points. Okay, what's going to happen? Game 7, home floor. 75% of teams throughout the history of basketball win Game 7 on their home floor. Denver didn't do it. And it just makes you think that this league is a little more wide open than it's ever been. There's going to be 6 consecutive different winners of the finals since the Golden State Warriors went back-to-back. The Warriors are a part of that. They surprised people in 2022. I think the Timberwolves are surprising people in 2024. I think last year the Nuggets might have surprised some people. So the Warriors are in a different position because they're maybe not as young and up-and-coming as a lot of these teams that are jumping the gun. But in a way, the fact that there is parity in the league, the fact that there has been so much commotion, it does make me feel like the Warriors might not be as far away as we think.
Well, I think the good news is there hasn't been a repeat champion since the Golden State Warriors. So it shows you that it's tough to stay on top. The one thing we've talked about with the Warriors the last 2 or 3 years, and many people have said it, and that's they got to get bigger, the Warriors. And I don't think there's any doubt about it. They got to get bigger, and they've got to figure out a way to get more athletic, because I'm looking at the Warriors' most athletic players, and I see Kuminga and I see Wiggins. That's about it. And you look at these other teams, I mean, Minnesota just comes at you with 6'7", 6'8", length, athleticism, and everybody's a threat from 3-point range. Even though they are a big team. So when I look at the Golden State Warriors, I mean, the way the Minnesota Timberwolves defend would concern me if I'm a Golden State Warrior fan, because they swarm. They're relentless. And they're not this team in the regular season. I don't think you can be for 82 games, Evan. But I look at the Warriors. How do they score against a team like Minnesota when Minnesota's playing like that?
Well, the Denver Nuggets couldn't.
I know.
Or somebody not named Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray couldn't. And Murray mainly did in the first half. No, I mean, I think it shows you that what they discuss needing to be addressed at the end of the season still remains true.
Yeah.
You need to get younger. You need to get faster. You need to get bigger. And if they do that, I don't think it's, and maybe that's what I'm more projecting, Steiny. Like, as they're currently constructed, yes, they're I don't know if they're eons away, but they're pretty damn far away from the two teams we saw go toe-to-toe in Game 7 yesterday in Denver. But if they can get younger, and it might not be players that are big names, if they can get more athletic. I mean, look at the Minnesota Timberwolves. Before this season, we didn't know about Jaden McDaniels. We didn't even know that much about Naz Reid outside of the fact that he's Wilt Chamberlain every time he plays Golden State.
You know, they got KD, but we got Jaden McDaniels.
Case in point. We didn't know if Rudy Gobert could match up with Jokic through a 7-game series. We didn't know if Karl Anthony Towns was a poodle or if he was a dog. If he was actually a cat, I think he put a lot of people on notice during this series. There's a lot of things that we learned about these players during this series, and I don't think it's out of bounds to believe that over the course of next year, if the Warriors make some proper adjustments, they can't be a team that could suddenly shock some people.
I just think it's amazing the way a guy like Karl Anthony Towns has, in a way, been maligned for a lot of his career. He's been criticized, called soft. He was pretty good last night. So was Gobert. I mean, you look at Karl Anthony Towns, who can shoot threes and defend on the interior, and Rudy Gobert. Just listen. I don't think he's the greatest player in the world either, but he's huge. He's huge. And between him and Karl Anthony Towns, they were able, I think, to wear out Jokic. And I look at the Warriors and I'm thinking to myself, they can't do that to Jokic because they don't have anybody that can contend with him down low. And the reality of the situation is they stopped going to Jokic as much down low because he wasn't having success. And then he had to go out to the three-point line, and he wasn't making his three-point shots. So, I mean, that team, Minnesota, they defend like crazy. And, I mean, I like their chances against Dallas. I like them a lot.
Against Dallas?
Yeah.
But this is something too, Steiny.
Yeah.
Okay, so Luka Doncic just put up 3 straight triple-doubles to close out Oklahoma City. That's a guy that could potentially take over a series. Kyrie Irving has been in the biggest moment before and obviously has delivered. So I still think there's a lot to learn about where the Warriors are at, how far they are, and what they might even be needing to address. For example, earlier today with Bonte and Butch, Anthony Slater said there's a big month coming for the Golden State Warriors. This is about that time where we relock in on everything that precedes July 1st, because though that's free agency, everything happens beforehand. So there's still some time between now and when that period begins, which I think is starting at right about now, whether it's negotiations that are internal, the Warriors trying to take the sample size that's been the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, see where they need to address themselves, all of that. But there's still a lot left in the postseason. If Minnesota gets beat by Dallas, well, then we might need to have another conversation about what is actually going to work for the Warriors. If Boston runs the table, and I think they're set up right now to do so, because Indiana is a team that shouldn't necessarily challenge them.
Right.
Okay, so if Boston's a team that walks away winners, or if they get upset by Indiana, what is going to work? There's still a lot left to be learned in this specific playoffs, and I think that's what contributes to my overarching feeling of optimism for Golden State, is that the league seems to be constantly changing. And though the Warriors don't, I think, yet have a clear direction of where they are or where they want to go, it doesn't mean that they can't find something, that they can't capture the magic. Like, the Timberwolves were built to beat the Denver Nuggets. Tim Conley orchestrated and was the architect of the Nuggets, left and then became the architect of the Minnesota Timberwolves. He built a team to beat that team. His team might not be capable of beating Dallas. And then we're rethinking that. I just feel like there's a lot of time left in the playoffs for us to assess how much the Warriors actually need to change.
Yeah, 888-957-9570 is the number. When you watch Minnesota, when you watch Denver, when you watch Dallas, what do the Warriors, what do they need to do to be able to play with these teams? Or do we still view the Warriors as a team that can play with the best teams when everything's clicking? But 888-957-9570, you look down their roster, and I didn't realize this until I kind of wrote all the names down. But you were talking about stuff's going to start happening. You're absolutely right. The Warriors have decisions to make on, listen to this, all these guys. Klay Thompson, Chris Paul, Kevon Looney, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and even Gary Payton II. Klay Thompson's a free agent. Chris Paul, his contract next year is not guaranteed. Moody and Kuminga are up for extensions. The same extension that Jordan Poole got a year ago, or 2 years ago, rather. And Kevon Looney set to make $8 million next year, but it's only three of it's guaranteed. So they may have Looney walking at the end of this year, and then that leaves Gary Payton II, who's making $9 million next year. Will the Warriors try to maybe redo that deal with him, see if they can spread it over a couple years? Because Gary Payton II can't opt out of $9 million after the last couple of years when he's been hurt. So maybe the Warriors and Gary Payton II maybe redo their thing. But, I mean, you're right. This is going to start happening with the Golden State Warriors. And, how does this team get better? Can they get better and not bring Klay back? Is that possible? 888-957-9570 is the number. And if you look at a guy like Kevon Looney, if he's gone, well, then he's going to need to be replaced. And how are you going to find somebody as good as Looney for less money, or who knows what it's like here?
I think you got one on the roster right now. I think Trace Jackson Davis proved that he's a better player right now than Kevon Looney. And that's not to dismiss all the great things that Kevon Looney has done for this team. But, Steiny, I think that's why we're in a position. You just ran down the list of all the decisions that they have to make. All five of those guys, essentially, are choices that the Warriors in previous years, when they were winning championships and competing for titles, would not have had to make choices about. But that's where they're at. They are in the middle of the NBA, and middle-of-the-pack NBA teams have to make 5 or 6 decisions about their roster every single offseason.
Right.
They're in the midst of it. So the fact that they have those choices to make, to me, means that they got flexibility. And last season, what was the word of the summer? Optionality. That's to create a position where if things did go wrong, I know you've always talked about this, how you have to forecast the worst possible place. Well, I think this probably was it. You didn't make the playoffs. You don't have a draft pick. And you got a lot of high-money, aging players. So you got to make choices about them. But they put themselves in a position to make those hard choices, as opposed to, well, we could have paid Thompson last summer. We could have paid this guy. We could have just rolled over Looney. No, they didn't choose to do that because they knew they were in a spot where, whether it's because of the league and the second apron or because they didn't feel like they were good enough, that they were going to have to switch things around. And so I'm excited about that because I think there are a lot of ways that they can get creative and also get better.
Yeah, 888-957-9570 is the number. How do the Warriors get better this offseason? What would your plan be? And, speaking of Klay Thompson, I got to tell you, I'm watching, and I know they're not similar players, but I'm watching Anthony Edwards, and I'm thinking he's Klay Thompson. Because he's now the two-way player who can impact a game on both ends of the floor. I mean, he was 6 for 24 last night. He did not make shots, but he still helped the Timberwolves win that game because he put the clamps on Murray. And when I think of Klay Thompson at his best, that's what he did. He'd get you 20-plus on offense, and then he would guard James Harden, or he would guard Russell Westbrook, or he would guard somebody like that, and turn them into a volume shooter. And, I mean, geez, what Anthony Edwards did yesterday, I mean, that was incredibly impressive. I mean, to impact that game without being able to make shots, that puts you in a different level of player, because most guys got to score in this league to impact a game. But man, Anthony Edwards, I mean, we're looking at a guy who might be able to lock guys up. I mean, he is so quick and he's so strong. I mean, he picked Jamal Murray. He just picked his pocket.
Well, and he needed to. Otherwise, he would have been 3 for 24 because he couldn't hit a jump shot. It was, I mean, seriously, that's how bad he was shooting. I mean, half of his field goal makes were transition dunks because he was ripping and running. The Thompson comp is interesting to me because, of course, the game that I felt like I was thinking about was the last time a team came back from down double digits at half on the road. That was the Golden State Warriors in 2018 against the Houston Rockets in Game 7. And if you just go through that box score, like James Harden had 32 that night. Klay Thompson's mostly on Harden. He took 29 shots.
Yeah.
Klay made him work for every single basket that he did or didn't make. And I know that a lot of people are going to remember that game as the game that the Rockets just couldn't make a three, but part of that is because of the defensive pressure of the Warriors. They missed some open threes. And I think that Minnesota, sometimes when, I don't know how you felt watching the totality of the series, Steiny, but it felt like sometimes the reason why the Nuggets were missing open threes is because they were expecting a defender to come, or there's so much pressure on hitting that one open look because you might not get one for the next 6 minutes of the game. And sometimes there is sweaty palms when you have an open look and you're not accustomed to getting that. And I felt like the Warriors would always do that to teams because you had to capitalize on those situations. You had to maximize your opportunities when the Warriors were at the peak of their powers because you might not get a better chance to knock them off. That's what it felt like Denver was playing with this entire series, and specifically last night in the second half, that they were playing with sweaty palms, that they felt the pressure at home, and they felt like this young and up-and-coming Wolves team that was throwing bodies every which way at them was going to find a way to claw back and win that game, or at least put themselves in a position to win that game. And when they drew even, the other part of it too, Steiny, was when they drew even, what was it, 72, Michael Porter hits a three to tie the game.
Yep.
You look at the next 4 or 5 scores for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards doesn't come up.
Right.
It's Naz Reid. It's Jaden McDaniels. It's Mike Conley. Rudy Gobert hitting a fadeaway with the shot clock expiring. It was the rest of the team around Edwards. So his defensive effort, to me, set the tone for what they did on that end of the floor. But offensively, the entire team beat Denver. The best 2 players in that game might have been Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, but they had nobody else to help them. The Timberwolves, that was a true team effort. And it did remind me a lot of what the Warriors did to Houston, who probably should have won that game.
Well, I mean, when they got down, they were down 20, Minnesota, early in the second half. And they figured out a way to absolutely shut down the Denver Nuggets. I didn't think a team could do that to the Nuggets. I really didn't. But they did about as well as you can do on Jokic, and they kept. To me, the Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. were the guys who failed to step up yesterday. And you're right. You look at it that way. Jokic put up his numbers. Jamal Murray had a great first half. He was so in the second half, but Anthony Edwards was defending him extremely well. But by and large, the 2 best players on Denver played better than Anthony Edwards, at least offensively. But that's only half the game. And what Edwards was able to do defensively, I thought, kind of spearheaded what Minnesota did defensively, because when you pick up full court and you're turning Murray and you're making him work, everybody else seems to feed off that as the guy who defends the ball right over half court. If you're hounding the guy, it usually sets a tone, and that's what Minnesota did yesterday. It was truly impressive.
And you also look at the difference in depth, and that's where the Warriors might have a case to believe that I think they have something next season. Is they are a pretty deep team, and while in the playoffs the rotation obviously shortens, Denver's depth was so depleted and so lackluster compared to Minnesota that yesterday they basically played a six-man lineup. Christian Brown was the only player off the bench who scored. He was the only player off the bench who played more than 9 minutes. Everyone else was playing into their 40s, was playing high 30s. And it wasn't like Malone, and we can get to him in a moment if you'd like, but it wasn't like he was saying, okay, well, I got to go away from this guy. He had no one to go to. The Warriors do have options off their bench, and some of that is because I don't know if the starting players have been as productive as we'd like, but next year I think there is room to believe that some of those players who contributed off the bench this season can take a big leap forward, either into the starting lineup or just from a productivity standpoint, because they got younger guys that they believe that they've groomed. And now next season, to me, Steiny, I mean, we're talking about the Giants and their young players and seeing what they got in them. Next season for the Golden State Warriors is going to be about what they're going to get from their younger players.
Yep.
What those players are going to do. And that, to me, is going to dictate how close or far they are away from the teams that we're talking about right now in the Final Four.
I mean, the one thing that I don't know how you could do it, and I'll put the rat on the table, sponsored by Atco Pest Control. How can you be watching, I'll just put it this, how can you be watching the NBA playoffs and want the Warriors to get an older veteran player and give up a couple young guys? I mean, to me, that would be as foolish as it gets. As foolish as it gets. Because if you get a veteran, let's just use Durant. They get Durant, but it costs them Kuminga and Moody. I mean, what makes anybody believe that team could make a run? You're going to have 4 starters over 34 years old. Look at what's happened in the playoffs. The Denver Nuggets were gassed. They were done. They had nothing left. So somebody explain to me how the Golden State Warriors could acquire somebody like Kevin Durant, and how do they win 53 games during the regular season and then play another 2 months of high-intensity basketball against a Minnesota or a Denver or a Dallas? The one thing that's hit me like a smack in the face, Evan, is this team cannot go all in this year and move some of their young guys. I just don't see it. I do not see how the Warriors can get older and be successful. It's one thing to have, a point guard like Mike Conley who's 36, but everybody else is 31 or younger. It's another thing to have Steph at 37, Clay at 34, Draymond at 34, Durant at 30. I mean, 888-957-9570. Do Warrior fans think that? Think a team with Kevin Durant could really do damage in today's Western Conference? I mean, I don't see it. I think the transition has to start this offseason, Evan.
I think you might be able to win a series, but what I don't want to see next year are the Golden State Warriors. I don't want to see them.
That's a 4. I've never heard that.
I don't want to see a team that is predominantly in their upper 30s. And we've tossed around all these different trades and hypotheticals and combinations. But in a way, Steiny, I want to see what they have. And I want to see what they have not just because it's new and it's fresh and it's a change, but also because I think there's enough of a sample size from the last 2 or 3 months of the season that would tell you that these players can help you win games. And that's the most important part of this. And it is going to help Steph age better. It is going to hopefully help Draymond age better and Klay Thompson if he's here in the future. I don't want to see players that are coming into the mix that are forcing those 3 aging guys, assuming Klay's on the team next year, to play even more than they had to this year. That, to me, is unrealistic.
888-957-9570 is the number. The Final Four in the NBA is now complete. The Minnesota Timberwolves will play the Dallas Mavericks. And simple question for Golden State Warrior fans. Do you think right now at their best, the Golden State Warriors can compete with these teams, or they need to get better? And if they need to get better, which most of you are likely going to say, how do they do that?